Hello everyone, my name is Daniel and I'm just a casual racer, and today I want to do an in-depth review of Cammus's 15 Newton meter wheelbase. And so to start, let's touch on two of the most important things, right, for any wheelbase review, and that is price and what is the force feedback quality like. First of all, talking about the price, my recommendation, and I'll get into why when I get into quality and things like that later throughout this review, is just purchase the wheelbase by itself for $450. Then also get either a quick release, maybe two quick releases, get a round rim. Their round rim is actually quite good at $64. And so you'd be out the door at $553 with one quick release, a round wheel rim, and the wheelbase here. Perhaps you pick up a second so you can do a vintage rim or something like that as well. Or attach, a third-party option for a Formula style rim. I do recommend not ordering the bundle because, to be frank, the button plate that Cammus produces is just not good. So you want to avoid getting the button plate from Cammus. You're much better saving your money. If you get the bundle, it comes to like $160 something to add that. And to me, you're better taking that and putting it towards something. For example, probably the Moza KS wheel, because you can use it with third-party wheelbases via USB at $280, is probably one of the very best options for a Formula style rim. Unfortunately, I don't have one just yet, but for now I've been doing something similar with the Fanatec GT3 rim. I had to use a Sim Racing Machines adapter, which adds cost, so it's $200 plus then $160, $170. So you're at $370 if you were to do this just right away. But even that, with Cammus Quick Release, would provide a really good option if that was something you wanted to do. So that, in terms of pricing, kind of sets you up. So, like I mentioned, kind of $553 to get you started with a quick release, just the round wheel rim and the wheelbase itself. And of course, it has buttons on the front, and so that would give you some options there. You don't necessarily need something with buttons right away. So, pretty reasonable price point. When Cammus came into the market, they really pushed the mid-range, and the mid-range responded. And that's something that you kind of have to consider, because the $400 ready-to-race bundle comes with pedals, a removable wheel rim, and the 5 Newton meter wheelbase, which is compatible with both PC and Xbox if you have the correct type of rim. That is, it's a tough competitor, right? And so that's where, now getting to force feedback, what does this bring to the table that could compete with a bundle like that? Or some of Moza's offerings, which are really quite affordable as well. Well, one thing is 15 Newton meters of torque, right? That is the biggest thing this delivers. Force feedback, I'll be honest, I have a CSL DD. I go back and forth when I'm developing sim racing mods for Story Sim Studios and the physics. I like to test on both these wheelbases. So I use them in a professional capacity. And for me, the Cammus with its 15 Newton meters is great. I love to test the extra strength, and then also I'll test on my Fanatec CSL DD. I would say a couple of things. One, Fanatec tends to support more titles, and it's easier to dial in the force feedback, in my opinion. So that is one thing, but you can get it there if you work. I wish there was more resources. That's part of the issue. There's not as many resources for the Cammus direct drive wheelbase, especially when you get to older titles and things like that. You're really on your own. With Fanatec, it's a lot easier to find stuff for those titles and what recommended settings. The second thing is, I do think there is a slight amount of detail difference, 1-2%. It's not a huge deal, but when I am going back and forth between the two for my work, I do notice, especially if I add the boost pack, there's clear difference there in detail. Not enough to say that you shouldn't get this. No, don't misunderstand. I'm just trying to lay out all the facts for you. However, there is another thing I notice every time I go back and forth, and I notice it a lot more than I notice any detailed discrepancies. I notice that this thing's a whole lot stronger, and it's great. For example, when I was out doing work on a project for Authentic Simulation, and I was test driving the Rush SR out at MSR Houston, and I was driving that car. In preparation for that, I don't get a lot of seat time in race cars. I've done some track days and things like that, but driven a fun McLaren back in the day, GT4, excuse me, but I haven't had a ton of seat time. One thing I do have is a lot of time behind a sim rig, and I knew the Rush SR didn't have force feedback, or excuse me, didn't have power steering. And so what I did is I got my Cammus wheelbase, I cranked up the force, and I will say when I got in that car, yeah, it was an experience being in the real car that, you know, when you go over a bump, really feeling that through the wheel, it's a lot of fun, and I felt really prepared because of the experience I got with Cammus's strength. And I say that because when does Cammus deliver? They deliver affordable 15 Newton meters of force. And I don't want you to take that lightly. For some people, perhaps you want to get into karting. Perhaps you need to experience those forces. It is a really big deal. Now, I would like to also say that for the average person, though, is that really that necessary? I don't run this at 15 Newton meters normally. Average, I run this around 8, 9, a little bit stronger perhaps than my Fanatec. If I was personally using it, I do crank it up when I'm testing on cars and dialing in force feedback. But like I said, my personal strength level's around 9 Newton meters, maybe 10. And so that's what I enjoy. And that's someone who I do a ton of sim racing for my work. I do a ton of sim racing for enjoyment. And I've been doing this for a long time. And so I'm very used to strength that wheelbases can put out. I just tend to not like, I don't want a 20 Newton meter wheelbase. I mean, it would be cool, but I wouldn't use it that often. I don't want it to beat me up. But when you look at, for example, most people, right, especially if you're moving from a Logitech D29, which produces, I believe, around 2.5 to 3 Newton meters of force, similar 3 to 3.9, I believe, if you're on a Thrustmaster T300, you don't really necessarily need to jump to a 15 Newton meter wheelbase unless you have a specific use for it. So that's where it's like, yes, you feel it. It's nice to have the overhead, right? You don't have to worry about clipping and things like that. But at the same time, that is what this delivers. So if you don't need the strength, then the biggest advantage that the Cammus wheelbase here has kind of disappears. But if you are looking for the strength, then this is definitely something that you should consider, and stick with me here as we dive into kind of the other features of the review. And as I dive into the other features of this wheelbase in this review. Alright, the second thing now, let's talk about like kind of the ecosystem. I did mention I don't recommend the button plates, so what else do you have? Like, what other options does Cammus provide? Nothing. You are stuck with a button plate with a round wheel rim option, which you can get by itself, or you can get a Formula 1 style rim. Thankfully, Cammus allows you to use any wheel rim you want. They don't lock you out like Fanatec does in the ecosystem, which is great. Huge plus for this base for that. You don't need an adapter. You don't need to go buy the podium hub like you have to do with Fanatec, or use like sim racing machines, you know, adapter, button adapter, or whatever. But there isn't a lot of affordable options from Cammus. And you'd think, like, if I'm buying Cammus, right, I want affordable options at affordable base. No, now you're stuck turning to third-party options. And if you're doing something like this, by the time you add sim racing machines adapter, now it's a lot of money. Maybe you look at like Cube Control's GSI, something like that, can be quite a bit. I mean, Moe's is probably your most affordable option with the KS wheel, but most of their wheels aren't compatible via USB, so you couldn't use them. So it kind of limits you. Now, I will say, right, I don't want to say it stops you completely. I got a great vintage rim here. I have another round rim right here like I recommend getting. I've also converted the McLaren, probably the KS, Moza KS wheel, you could do that. So it's not like you can't have an ecosystem. But if you were looking for the broadest ecosystem around, this isn't probably it. It is open, so you can go get GSI, you can go get Moza. But at that point, right, we're getting 15 Newton meters because this option is because it's affordable. If you're starting to look at buying some of those more expensive wheel rim options because you want a big wheel collection, well, then you're probably a little bit more of a high roller anyways in terms of your sim racing hobby. And you could probably go for something more fancy, perhaps like the new Club Sport Plus, which is compatible with PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, as, you know, extreme detail, the new full force technology. You get the full lineup of Fanatec products. You can buy the podium hubs, right, and use outside wheelbase wheel rims and things like that if you want. Like, it's just Asetek, for example, they have a lot of good products, and so it's one of those things where the affordability of the wheelbase itself is let down a little bit by the lack of an affordable ecosystem. I've said this in my early initial impressions video. Cammus needs to produce a wheel rim that has a screen, a Formula style rim that is a lot better. They also need to release a version 2 of their button plate that has much better buttons because they're mushy, and encoders. They're just not very good, and it lets the whole wheel down. It also, they're paddle shifters. I've upgraded these with magnets here, and it still is not as good as, for example, the $200 McLaren GT3 rim here. I will give you updated. It's better than what you get with for example, something like Logitech or an entry-level Fanatec CSL P1 wheel or BMW wheel, but that's not really what I think people are looking for necessarily if you hear magnetic paddle shifter. So that's why I don't recommend this. The quality just really isn't there. And speaking of quality, kind of diving into the rest of the wheelbase, real solid construction. Like I said, the quick release is great. The wheel rims excel. Actually, the round wheel rim here is one of my favorite wheel rims. I use this all the time. I have an adapter so I can use D1 spec wheels. I use this all the time on my Fanatec wheel rim, and I use it on the Cammus direct drive wheelbase as well. And I just switched it. I'll actually be like in the one room, I'll pull it off, and I'll have to go to the other room and put it on because it's just such a great size, and I use it all the time. And it's a great feel. It's a fake leather, but feels really nice, really good stitching. And yeah, so I will say that is high quality. I didn't get a chance to check out their Formula style wheel rim, but it looks to be decent. From other reviewers, it seems to be reasonably high quality. Fortunately, the buttons on the base also suffer from the same issue that the buttons on the button plate do, but you know, it's not terrible. I mean, they are extra, kind of nice to have the option. I will say one other thing about quality that does concern me a little bit. The USB cable that was included when this was shipped, the USB-B to A, had issues. It was causing some disconnections. It took me a while to figure out what it was. Initially, I thought it might be a power supply issue. That was not the case. The disconnections, because it was like rebooting, and depending on the title, you know, then you lose your force feedback and your connection and all that, and it's just an absolute pain. But I replaced that cord with a really high quality version, and that solved the issue for me. So definitely, I think, consider, especially if it seems cheap when you get it, definitely replace the USB Type B to A, and you will potentially save yourself a lot of hassle from disconnections and things like that. So those are some points on the quality. Overall, it's not bad. Like I said, it's pretty solid. This thing's built like a brick. It weighs a ton. You are going to need a sturdy either aluminum profile or very strong metal sim rig to mount this to. Like I said, it's 15 Newton meters of force. And that's another reason where it's kind of like, who is this meant for, right? This wheelbase is supposed to be affordable, right? It came in the mid-range, kind of shook up the market. But I think they priced it close to what they could their margins were pretty small already. And then Fanatec responds, Moza responds, and so kind of like you get this whole pushing down in the mid-range. Mid-range now, like for example, as I mentioned, the CSL Fanatec CSL bundle, you can get pedals, wheel rim, and the base for $400. Like I mentioned, $553, and then you're not getting pedals. So it's one of those things where, and then like, okay, if you want to start adding more wheels, you're stuck with kind of expensive third-party options to add. And now why didn't you just get something that was more expensive in the first place? So it's kind of like, who is this for, or what range does it fall in? And outside of someone who would be relatively happy with, a round rim, maybe purchasing one Moza, or even using their McLaren GT3 rim, or perhaps you do go ahead and buy the button plate knowing that it's not necessarily the greatest, but you're okay with just having the option. And you need that extra strength because perhaps you want something that can translate, something that will match perhaps the go-kart you're driving or whatever. Apart from that kind of pretty narrow focus, it's hard for me to find an audience for this base, unfortunately. It's not that the base is bad. The base is quite good. It's just right now it seems to be priced a little bit out of the market. I will say I think the response is it's $400 for the Ready to Race bundle, right? $400 and you included the wheel rim. So if it was $400 for this base and you included the wheel rim, you don't need the button plate. Your button plate unfortunately kind of sucks. Sorry, Cammus. But if you include the wheel rim, a quick release, and the base for $400, you're back in the game. And I'll be honest, right now, if that was the case, I would recommend this to a lot more people, because now you're at the price point where, okay, yeah, it's 5 newton meters versus 15 newton meters, same price. Sure, you don't include pedals, but generally this is higher quality than, for example, a lot of those entry-level wheel rims that you're including at that $400 price. Or if you add another wheel rim that's nicer, then of course the price goes up in the Fanatec bundle. So it's not really a fair comparison for some of those nicer rims. So like, for example, we compare the P1 rim in that bundle, which comes in at $400. And this example, a lot of people already have pedals, or then they can pick whatever pedals they want to go with this. $400 Cammus, or even $450, but just include the quick release and the wheel rim itself too. That right there makes this really compelling, and I recommend this. So if you see a sale where the price drops to around there with that offering, I would say $450 with the quick release and the rim and the base. I would say I recommend that. Recommend it for a decent amount of the people. If you don't need a huge ecosystem in terms you're not planning to buy a bunch of wheels, you don't need console compatibility, and you're looking for something that's going to deliver some pretty good force. Perhaps you've tried out someone's CSL DD, whether at 5 newton meters, 8 newton meters, and you just know that's not enough. This would be a great option for you. It really would. It's just the price is a little high right now. I don't know if they have the margin to drop the price. We'll see. I know they're not really working on any wheel rims or steering wheels that I know of, but I do know that they have their 8 newton meter version of wheelbase. I'm very interested to see what that pricing is going to come in at. Perhaps they can shake up the market and come in at $300 or $400, although their C5 right now retails for $300, which I also think that's kind of interesting. Where is that finding its spot in the audience? Because Fanatec is squeezing people right now with their pricing, and unfortunately I think Cammus is getting a little bit squeezed right now. And it's, as I mentioned, it has shrunk the audience for this product to be pretty narrow. And I was hoping for some bigger discounts for Black Friday. There really wasn't anything that blew me away. Will blow me away, like I mentioned, $400 for the base and the round rim. That would be like, yeah, no, that's a pretty good deal. That's something to consider. Generally, overall, my initial impressions, like just in terms of like quality of life, I had it on my wheelbase, or excuse me, on my rig, and I would just use it, pop the wheels in and out, change up what I was doing, and it just became effortless. I enjoyed it, especially once I got the disconnection issue fixed. Yeah, it just became real effortless, became seamless, enjoyed it on my rig, and it was great. So it's something where, for me, will I continue to use it, I guess, as my daily driver? It's really going to be interesting. I'm going to be getting the Moza KS wheel, and so I think that could have a big impact. I do have a few more Fanatec wheel rims. I will say this, I am selling this wheel base, has convinced me to sell some of my Fanatec wheel rims. I purchased the new QR2, right, for Fanatec, and I ordered the bundle, so I got 3 metal ones and 2 plastic ones. I was like, alright, if I can't, like anything more than that I can't convert over, I need to sell. So I've reduced my Fanatec wheels down to 5, converted this one over so I could use it with Moza, and yeah, so I guess it's a real contender for me. Obviously I got it for free, so it's not the same as having spent money, but it's one of those things, I think if you had a CSL DD and you had the Cammus, you would find yourself using both and going back and forth between both. So it really comes down to a value proposition at that point and the ecosystem you want to be tied within. And that's something that's going to depend on what Cammus and Fanatec do going forward. So check the prices. This is a good product, apart from the button plate. Not good. Wheelbase good. And yeah, I think this is a real contender, and I hope that Cammus is able to find some margin to reduce the price further and put some heat on Fanatec again, because I feel like Fanatec's getting a little bit comfortable, and hopefully Cammus can bring it. So excited, definitely enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Cammus, for sending me this product. I have a referral link in my link tree, not directly linked. I don't directly link anything in my video description, but if you go to my link tree, you'll see a whole bunch of options and ways to support me and discount codes and stuff like that. Check out Historic Sim Studios. That's what I do primarily in my day-to-day. If you want to buy a t-shirt there, I make about $5.50 off each of those. So there's a lot of different ways to support me. Check out any of that if you'd be so kind. But of course, always grateful that you watch my videos. Hopefully this is helpful. But most of all, I hope that you all have a fantastic rest of your week.